She whispered, "Don't leave me," the cowboy who said, "I'll never leave you." It was a crisp autumn evening in a small, quiet town that seemed to remain untouched by time. The town, nestled in the heart of the country, had a charm that only small communities seemed to hold. The streets were lined with old, red brick houses, their roofs dusted with the first hint of frost. The scent of the surrounding forests filled the air, a reminder of the seasons changing. In this town, life moved slowly, with everyone knowing everyone else's name, and not much ever changed. Emily had always found comfort in the predictability of small-town life. She worked as a nurse at the local clinic, a position that allowed her to stay connected to the community. For her, there was nothing more rewarding than helping the people around her, seeing the same faces come in and out each day. She was content in her routine, with evenings spent reading in her cozy apartment or walking down the quiet streets, enjoying the peace that came with the town's slower pace. But life, as it often does, had a way of surprising her. It was at a charity event, one of the rare social gatherings in the town, that she first met Jack. The event had been organized to raise funds for the town's new community center, a project that had been in the works for months. It was a gathering full of familiar faces, friends, family, and neighbors, all coming together to support a cause they cared about. Emily wasn't one for large crowds, but she had agreed to attend, mostly because of her close friend Sarah, who was the event's coordinator. The evening was a blur of speeches and handshakes. The food was good, the music was lively, and everyone seemed to be in good spirits. But it wasn't until she spotted him across the room that Emily's attention was fully captured. Jack was standing by the entrance, a bit apart from the rest of the crowd, with his broad shoulders leaning casually against the doorframe. He looked out of place, not because he wasn't dressed appropriately. He wore a nice, fitted shirt and jeans, but because there was something about him that set him apart from everyone else in the room. He wasn't tall, but his presence seemed to fill the space. His hair was a messy, dark brown, and his face was rough, like someone who had lived through hard times. He had an intensity in his eyes that was rare in people she'd met, and despite his rugged appearance, there was a softness to his expression, as if he was quietly observing the world around him. Emily didn't know why, but something about him made her curious. Perhaps it was the way he stood, so calm and yet somehow distant. Perhaps it was the way his gaze met hers when their eyes accidentally locked across the room. Whatever it was, it sparked a feeling inside of her that she couldn't quite explain. She tried to ignore the flutter in her chest as she refocused on her conversation with Sarah, but it was no use. Her eyes kept drifting back to him, and eventually, after what felt like an eternity, Sarah nudged her in the side. "Are you going to go talk to him?" Sarah asked, her voice low but teasing. Emily blushed and glanced away, unsure of how to respond. "Who? You know who I mean," Sarah grinned. "The cowboy by the door." Emily didn't know why Sarah called him a cowboy, but it was clear she was referring to Jack. She wasn't even sure why it mattered. She had never been one to approach strangers at social events. But there was something different about him, and before she could stop herself, she found herself excusing herself from the conversation and walking toward him. When she reached him, she wasn't sure what to say. Her nerves were suddenly overwhelming. She didn't often find herself tongue-tied, but this time was different. She smiled, a little awkwardly, and he smiled back, that quiet smile that seemed to make her feel at ease in an instant. "Hi," she said, her voice soft, almost as if she were unsure whether or not to be there. "Hey," Jack replied, his voice warm but steady. He didn't offer her a handshake or a formal greeting, just a simple acknowledgement. "I'm Jack." "Emily," she said, surprised at how normal the conversation felt despite her initial nerves. For a moment they stood in silence, the noise of the party swirling around them. Jack's gaze wasn't uncomfortable, though. It was like he was seeing her, really seeing her, and that made her feel both self-conscious and strangely validated. "So," Jack said after a pause, "you're one of the organizers?" Emily laughed lightly, a bit embarrassed. "No, not really. I'm just here to support." "My friend's the one organizing everything." Jack nodded, his eyes scanning the room for a moment before returning to her. "Small town, huh?" "Yeah," Emily agreed, smiling at the way he put it. "It's nice, not much ever changes." "That's kind of the point, right?" Jack said, his tone thoughtful. "There's something peaceful about things staying the same." Emily agreed. She found herself liking the simplicity of their conversation, how easily the words seemed to come. There was no forced small talk, No need to make awkward jokes or navigate the usual pleasantries. For some reason, talking to Jack felt like talking to someone she had known for much longer than just a few minutes. They continued talking for a while, and though the evening was moving on, it felt as though time had slowed down for the two of them. The more they talked, the more Emily learned about Jack. He wasn't from the town originally, though he had grown up on a ranch not far away. He had spent the past several years working in other places, but recently he had decided to return to his roots. Emily couldn't help but be fascinated by his life on the ranch, how different it seemed from her own, and yet how much she could relate to the idea of simplicity and stability. Eventually, the evening began winding down, and people started heading toward the door. Emily found herself standing at the entrance with Jack, feeling a strange reluctance to leave. It wasn't that she wanted the night to last forever, but there was something about their conversation, about the connection they had made, that made her wish for just a little more time. "Well," Emily said, shifting her weight slightly, "I guess I should head home." Jack nodded, and for a moment neither of them moved. The world around them seemed to be fading out, leaving only the two of them standing there in the doorway. "It was nice meeting you," Emily added, feeling a little awkward but knowing it was the right thing to say. "Yeah," Jack said, his voice a little softer now. "It was." Then, before either of them could say more, he stepped back slightly, his hand resting lightly on the doorframe. "Maybe I'll see you around?" Emily nodded, a smile tugging at her lips. "I hope so." As she turned to walk away, she couldn't help but feel a strange sensation, one of anticipation, like something new and exciting was just beginning. She wasn't sure why, but the meeting with Jack had felt significant, as though their paths had crossed for a reason. And in the back of her mind, she couldn't shake the thought that this encounter was only the beginning. Over the next few weeks, Jack and Emily saw each other more often, though their meetings were often brief. There was something natural about their growing connection, like two pieces of a puzzle that were meant to fit together. Emily's life, which had once been a predictable cycle of work and quiet evenings, began to feel brighter with Jack in it. Each time they met, whether by chance or design, they found themselves talking for hours, discovering new things about each other. Emily found herself looking forward to these moments. Jack didn't just talk about the usual small-town topics. He had a way of looking at the world that made her see it differently. He spoke about the open sky on the ranch, the feeling of freedom that came from working with animals, and the simplicity of life that he'd longed for when he'd lived in the city. His words were raw and honest, and she found herself captivated by the way he viewed the world. On the other hand, Jack listened to Emily with a curiosity that made her feel heard in ways she hadn't expected. He wanted to know about her life, her dreams, her fears, the things that made her smile. They would meet at the coffee shop on Main Street, or sometimes take walks by the lake at sunset, where the water mirrored the fading colors of the sky. There, with the quiet hum of nature around them, they spoke about everything and nothing at all. The connection they shared was growing stronger each day, something deeper than mere attraction. It was a bond formed by mutual respect, understanding, and the comfort of simply being themselves around one another. It wasn't long before their conversations shifted from the surface level to something more meaningful. Emily shared her hopes for the future, her desire to help people, and how much she loved being a nurse. She told Jack about the long hours she spent at the clinic, how rewarding yet exhausting it could be. Jack listened intently, never interrupting, always present in the moment. "I've always known I wanted to help people in some way," Emily explained one evening as they walked along a quiet path near the lake. "It's why I became a nurse. I want to make a difference, even if it's just in one person's life." Jack smiled, his eyes softening as he looked at her. "You do make a difference," he said, his voice sincere. "I can tell by the way you talk about your work, the way you care for people." Her heart warmed at his words. It wasn't often that Emily felt seen for who she truly was. Most people saw her as a nurse, a worker, a caretaker. But Jack somehow saw beyond that. He saw the passion in her, the strength in her, and that meant more to her than she could express. Jack, in turn, began opening up about his own past, revealing more about his life on the ranch. He spoke about growing up in the countryside, where hard work was a way of life. He told her about the early mornings spent feeding cattle, the long days in the fields, and the satisfaction that came from a job well done. But there was sadness in his voice when he talked about his family. Jack had lost his parents when he was young, and though he had inherited the ranch from them, it had never felt like his home. He had spent years traveling, trying to escape the weight of expectations and the memories that the ranch held. "I guess I was running away from everything," he admitted one night as they sat on the porch of a small diner watching the stars. "But sometimes running just takes you in circles. I thought I could find a place where I could be myself, but I kept ending up back here. Maybe that's where I belong." Emily listened, her heart aching for him. She could see the conflict in his eyes, the longing for peace, for acceptance. She didn't say much, but she didn't need to. Her presence was enough to let him know he wasn't alone. Their connection deepened with every conversation. They didn't need grand gestures or big speeches. Their bond was built on the little things, the shared moments of silence, the laughter over a joke that only the two of them understood, the way their hands brushed accidentally but felt like fate. It was in these quiet, everyday moments that Emily began to realize how much Jack had come to mean to her. One afternoon, Jack invited her to the ranch. He had mentioned it before, but this time he was serious. He wanted her to see the place he had called home for so many years, the place that had shaped him into who he was. Emily was both excited and nervous. She had heard so much about the ranch, but she had never seen it for herself. When she arrived, she was immediately struck by the vastness of the land. The ranch stretched for miles, with rolling hills and fields of golden wheat that seemed to go on forever. There was a rustic charm to the place, from the old barn to the weathered wooden fences. It was quiet, peaceful, nothing like the bustling town she was used to. Jack showed her around, explaining the different areas of the ranch and introducing her to the animals. She was surprised by how calm the horses were around him and how the cattle seemed to respond to his presence. It was clear that Jack had a special bond with the land and the animals. As they walked, he pointed out the areas where he'd spent most of his childhood, the field where he'd learned to ride, the creek where he'd gone fishing with his father. Emily couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. She could see the connection Jack had with this place, and she understood why it had been so hard for him to leave. But it wasn't just the land that drew Jack back, it was the memories. They walked through the old house, which was small but filled with warmth and history. Jack showed her the room where he'd grown up, the pictures on the walls, the old rocking chair his mother used to sit in. There was a quiet sadness in the air, but also a sense of nostalgia, a longing for the past, but also a deep love for the land and the life that had once been. "I've always felt like this place is part of me," Jack said as they stood in the doorway of the old house. "I guess that's why I keep coming back. It's the one place that's always been mine, even if it doesn't feel like it sometimes." Emily didn't know what to say. She didn't need to say anything. She simply took his hand, offering her support in the only way she knew how. She could feel the weight of his words, the unspoken pain behind them. Jack had been carrying this burden for so long, and though he didn't say it out loud, Emily knew that part of him was still searching for a place to belong. As the afternoon turned into evening, the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange. Jack and Emily sat on the porch, watching the stars slowly appear one by one. The air was cool, but the warmth of their shared presence made it feel comfortable. There, in the quiet of the ranch, Emily felt a sense of peace that she hadn't realized she was missing. "I'm glad you came," Jack said softly, his voice carrying the weight of the moment. "I've never shown anyone this place before." Emily smiled, her heart full. "I'm glad you wanted me to see it." For the first time in a long time, Jack seemed at peace. The ranch, the memories, the land, it was all part of who he was, and now Emily was part of that too. As they sat together, the night stretched on, and the connection between them deepened. There was no need for words now. Their bond was stronger than any promises or vows. In that quiet moment, Emily knew that Jack was someone she could trust, someone who had shared his heart with her in a way that felt both beautiful and raw. The next chapter of their story was just beginning, and they both knew that whatever came next, they would face it together. The days that followed the visit to the ranch felt like a dream. Emily and Jack continued to spend more time together, their connection deepening with every passing day. The love that had started as a quiet understanding began to bloom into something more powerful, something neither of them had expected. Every moment they shared seemed to reaffirm their growing bond, and Emily felt as if she was discovering a whole new side of life that she had never known existed. But life, as it often does, has a way of changing things when we least expect it. One morning, Emily woke up feeling unusually tired. At first, she thought it was just the result of a busy week at the clinic, where the pace had been relentless. But as the day went on, the exhaustion didn't pass. She found herself feeling lightheaded and weak, unable to shake the strange sense of heaviness in her body. She tried to push through, telling herself that it was just a little cold or maybe a simple fatigue from the long hours at work. But as the day turned into night, her symptoms worsened. By the time she got home from work, she could barely keep her eyes open. She knew something was wrong, but she didn't want to worry Jack or anyone else. He had his own burdens to carry, and she didn't want to add to them. So she kept her discomfort to herself, deciding to rest and see how she felt in the morning. However, the next day was no better. She felt weak and dizzy, and her usual energy was nowhere to be found. Finally, she made an appointment at the clinic, hoping to get some answers. The nurse took her vitals and ran a few tests, but the results left them both puzzled. Emily's symptoms didn't fit with anything the nurse could pinpoint. She was told to rest, drink plenty of fluids, and follow up in a few days if things didn't improve. But instead of improving, things got worse. Over the next few days, Emily found herself unable to keep food down, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. Her body felt foreign to her, like it was no longer functioning the way it should. It was as if every cell in her body was exhausted and fighting a battle she couldn't see or understand. By the time she called Jack, her energy was completely drained, and she could barely manage a conversation. "Jack," she whispered weakly when he answered the phone. Her voice was barely a breath. "Something's not right. I don't feel good." Jack didn't hesitate. "I'm coming over," he said, his voice firm and steady, though Emily could hear the worry beneath it. "I'll be there in 20 minutes. True to his word, Jack arrived within the half hour. He walked in, his usual calm demeanor replaced with concern as he saw how pale and weak Emily looked. Without saying a word, he helped her to the couch and sat beside her, rubbing her back gently as she rested her head on his shoulder. "What's going on, Emily?" Jack asked, his voice soft but insistent. "Tell me everything." Emily explained what had been happening over the past few days. The dizziness, the nausea, the strange fatigue that wouldn't go away. She felt helpless, and even though she tried to downplay it, Jack could see that this wasn't just a passing illness. Something was wrong, something serious. "You should go to the hospital," Jack suggested, his voice tight with concern. "You need to see a doctor." Emily hesitated. She didn't want to make a big deal out of it, didn't want to burden anyone with her worries. But Jack wouldn't hear it. "I'm not leaving until you agree," he said, his voice gentle but firm. Despite her hesitation, Emily knew that Jack was right. This was beyond what she could handle on her own. With a sigh, she agreed, and within the hour, they were on their way to the hospital. Jack didn't leave her side the entire time, holding her hand as they waited for the doctor to arrive. His calm presence was a comfort to Emily, even though her mind was racing with questions she didn't have answers to. When the doctor finally arrived, she quickly examined Emily and ordered more tests. After what felt like hours of waiting, the doctor returned with the results. Emily's heart sank as she listened to the doctor explain what they had found. The diagnosis was serious. She had a condition that required immediate treatment, one that could affect her health for a long time if left untreated. Jack's face hardened when he heard the news. He turned to Emily, his eyes filled with both concern and determination. "We'll get through this," he said, his voice low and steady. "I'll be here every step of the way. You're not alone in this." But Emily couldn't help but feel overwhelmed. The news hit her like a ton of bricks, and for the first time in months, she felt the weight of her own vulnerability. She had always been the one to take care of others, to stay strong for the people around her. Now, she found herself needing someone else to be strong for her. The thought of facing this battle alone terrified her. Jack could sense her fear. He took her hand and squeezed it gently, offering his silent support. "You don't have to be strong all the time," he said softly. "It's okay to lean on others, Emily, and right now you've got me. I'm not going anywhere." His words meant the world to her. Emily had always prided herself on being independent, on taking care of herself and others. But in that moment, she realized that it was okay to let someone else in, to allow them to share the burden of the unknown. She didn't have to carry this weight alone, and as long as Jack was there, she knew she wouldn't have to. The next few weeks were a blur of hospital visits, treatment sessions, and sleepless nights. There were moments when Emily wondered if she would ever feel like herself again, moments when the pain and the uncertainty threatened to overwhelm her. But through it all, Jack was there. He didn't leave her side, even when things seemed darkest. He brought her flowers to brighten her room, played her favorite songs on his guitar, and whispered words of encouragement when she felt like giving up. "Remember what you told me once," Jack said one evening as he sat beside her bed, his hand resting gently on hers. "You're a fighter, you've got this." And somehow Emily believed him. With Jack by her side, she found the strength to keep going. His unwavering support gave her hope when she had none left. Every day was a small victory, a step closer to recovery. Though the road ahead was still uncertain, Emily knew one thing for sure: she wasn't facing it alone. As the days turned into weeks, Emily's condition began to improve. The treatment was working, and though it wasn't easy, she could feel her strength slowly returning. It was a slow process, but with every small improvement, she felt a little more like herself again. And through it all, Jack never wavered. He stayed by her side, offering her support, love, and care when she needed it most. He never once complained, never once made her feel like a burden. He simply stayed, just as he had promised. In the quiet moments when Emily found herself resting, she would think back to the day Jack had come to her rescue. It felt like so long ago, but the memory was still clear in her mind. He had made her a promise that day: "I'll never leave you." And in that moment, she knew that he had meant every word. With Jack's unwavering presence, Emily realized something important. Sometimes, the greatest strength comes from allowing others to share in your burdens. And for the first time in a long time, she felt truly grateful for the love and support she had found in Jack. As the weeks passed, Emily's health began to improve steadily, but the road to recovery was not without its challenges. Each day brought new obstacles, both physical and emotional. There were times when Emily would wake up feeling better, only to be brought down by a sudden wave of fatigue or pain. It was a roller coaster of emotions. Some days she felt like herself again, while other days she was reminded of the long, difficult journey ahead. But through it all, Jack remained a constant presence in her life. He was there for every doctor's appointment, every treatment session, every late-night conversation when the fear and uncertainty crept in. He had become her anchor, holding her steady when everything around her felt like it was shifting. Emily knew she couldn't have made it this far without him, and the thought of facing the world without his unwavering support was unimaginable. One particular afternoon, as the sunlight streamed through her window and painted the room in soft, golden hues, Emily sat on the edge of her bed, looking out at the world outside. The trees in the yard swayed gently in the breeze, and the sound of birds chirping filled the air. It was a peaceful moment, one that she had learned to appreciate more in the past few weeks. Life had a way of throwing unexpected challenges at you, but in the midst of it all, there were moments of beauty and peace, moments like this one. Jack walked into the room, carrying a cup of tea and a warm smile. His eyes softened when he saw her sitting by the window, her expression thoughtful. He placed the cup on the nightstand and sat down beside her, his presence calming her in an instant. "How are you feeling today?" he asked, his voice gentle. Emily took a deep breath, her gaze still fixed on the view outside. "Better, I think," she replied, her voice still a little weak. "It's just hard to shake the fatigue sometimes, but I'm doing okay." Jack nodded, his hand finding hers as he gently squeezed it. "You're doing amazing, Emily. You've come so far already." His words meant more to her than he could possibly know. In moments like this, when her body felt weak and her mind wandered to dark places, Jack's encouragement was a light that guided her through the darkness. He never once made her feel like she was a burden. He simply showed up day after day with kindness and care, and that was enough to make her feel like she could take on the world. "I've been thinking," Jack said, breaking the silence that had settled between them. "Once you're feeling better, maybe we should go somewhere. Take a trip, just the two of us. I know this has been hard, and I think you deserve to get away, even if it's just for a little while." Emily turned to him, her heart swelling at the thought of it. "That sounds wonderful," she said softly. "Where would we go?" Jack smiled, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "I was thinking we could go to the coast. There's a little beach town about a few hours from here. I've always wanted to go, and I think it would be the perfect place for us to just relax, breathe, and enjoy the peace." The idea of a getaway, a chance to leave behind the constant doctor's visits and treatments, filled her with hope. It felt like a dream, one that she was hesitant to believe could come true. But with Jack by her side, the world felt just a little more possible. "I'd love that," Emily said, her voice full of longing. "It sounds perfect." Jack leaned over and kissed her forehead, his lips lingering for a moment before he pulled back with a smile. "It's a promise, then. Once you're ready, we'll go. And we'll leave everything else behind, if only for a little while." Emily smiled at him, feeling a sense of warmth that she hadn't felt in a long time. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to imagine a future beyond her illness. She thought about the coast, the sound of the waves, the feel of the sun on her skin, and most importantly, she thought about sharing those moments with Jack. The days that followed were a blur of small victories. Emily began to regain her strength little by little. She started walking around the house more, doing small tasks that she had once taken for granted. She cooked a simple dinner one evening, and though it exhausted her, she felt an overwhelming sense of accomplishment. She was getting stronger, and with each passing day, she could feel herself slowly returning to the woman she had been before all of this began. Jack was there for every step of the way, offering his support and encouragement without ever pushing her. He would often help her around the house, making sure she didn't overexert herself. He would make her favorite meals, and they would sit together on the porch, talking about everything and nothing at all. Jack had a way of making even the most ordinary moments feel special, and Emily found herself cherishing the simplicity of their time together. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the landscape, Jack and Emily sat on the porch, side by side. The sky was painted with shades of pink and orange, and the world felt still and peaceful. Emily rested her head on Jack's shoulder, her eyes closing as she listened to the quiet hum of the world around them. "This is perfect," she whispered, a contented sigh escaping her lips. Jack turned to her, his hand gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I'm glad you're here with me," he said softly. "We've been through a lot, but we're still here, and that means something." Emily nodded, her heart full of gratitude. "It means everything," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. For a moment they simply sat in silence, their hearts in sync with the world around them. Emily knew that the road ahead would still be difficult. There would be more treatments, more challenges, and more days when she felt like giving up. But with Jack by her side, she knew she could face whatever came next. "I'm proud of you, Emily," Jack said after a while, his voice full of admiration. "You've been through so much and you've handled it with so much grace. You're stronger than you give yourself credit for." Emily looked up at him, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I couldn't have done it without you," she said quietly. "You've been my strength when I had none left. I don't know what I would have done without you." Jack smiled, his expression soft and sincere. "You don't have to worry about that," he said, his voice steady, "because I'm not going anywhere. I'll always be here." In that moment, Emily realized just how much Jack had become a part of her life. He was more than just a companion. He was her rock, her constant support, and the person who had shown her that it was okay to lean on someone when life got hard. The love they shared wasn't just about the good times. It was about facing the hard times together, hand in hand, and knowing that together they could weather any storm. As the evening stretched on and the stars began to twinkle in the sky above, Emily felt a sense of peace she hadn't felt in a long time. The future was still uncertain, but for the first time in a while, she felt hopeful. With Jack by her side, anything seemed possible. And no matter what the road ahead held, she knew she wouldn't have to face it alone. As the days went by, Emily's strength continued to improve. She had started to feel more like herself again, physically at least. There were still moments of doubt, times when the weight of everything she had gone through would come crashing back in. There were days when the exhaustion would return, and the fear would creep in, but for the most part, she was starting to believe that things might actually get better. Jack was, as always, by her side. He had become so much more than just her support system. He had become her partner in every sense of the word. He was the one who encouraged her when she doubted herself, who made her laugh when she felt like crying, and who always reminded her that she was stronger than she thought. Jack never once made her feel weak, even on the days when she felt like she couldn't go on. He was patient, kind, and unwavering in his devotion to her. One evening, after a long day of feeling tired and frustrated with her slow progress, Emily sat on the porch, looking out over the quiet yard. She had spent the day resting, but her mind was full of questions. Was she really getting better, or was it just a temporary improvement? How long would it take for her to feel completely healthy again? And most importantly, how long would it take for her to stop feeling like the illness was hanging over her, ready to return at any moment? Jack joined her on the porch, sitting beside her without saying anything at first. He didn't need to speak. His presence was enough to calm her racing thoughts. They sat in silence for a while, just listening to the sounds of the evening. The distant chirping of crickets, the rustling of leaves in the gentle breeze, and the soft hum of the world around them. It was peaceful, and for the first time in a long time, Emily felt a sense of calm that she hadn't been able to find in weeks. Finally, Jack spoke, breaking the silence. "You know, it's okay to be scared," he said quietly, his voice gentle. Emily turned to look at him, surprised by his words. She had never really talked to him about her fears. She had always tried to keep them to herself, thinking that if she admitted how scared she was, it would make everything feel even more real. "I'm not scared," she replied, trying to sound confident, though she knew Jack could see through her. Jack raised an eyebrow, his eyes soft but knowing. "You don't have to pretend with me, Emily. I can see it in your eyes. It's okay to be scared. This isn't easy, and it's okay to have moments when you don't know if you can keep going." Emily looked down, her fingers nervously twisting the edge of her shirt. She hadn't realized how much her fear had been weighing on her until Jack pointed it out. She had been so focused on trying to stay strong, on trying to put on a brave face, that she had never allowed herself to fully process how much she had been through. It wasn't just the illness. It was the fear of the unknown, the fear of not knowing if she would ever truly feel like herself again. "I'm scared that it'll come back," she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "I'm scared that even though I'm feeling better now, I'll never really be okay. What if this is just a break before everything falls apart again?" Jack reached over and gently placed his hand over hers, offering her comfort without saying a word. He didn't need to offer empty promises or tell her that everything would be fine. What she needed from him was simply the assurance that she didn't have to face these fears alone. "You're not alone," he said softly, his voice steady and unwavering. "We'll face whatever comes together. No matter what happens, I'm right here with you. You don't have to carry this burden by yourself." His words brought tears to her eyes, and she quickly wiped them away, not wanting to show how vulnerable she felt. But Jack was patient. He didn't push her to talk more or offer more words of reassurance. He just sat beside her, quietly offering his presence and his support, and that was enough. Sometimes, just knowing that someone else was there was more comforting than any words could ever be. The next few days brought more ups and downs. Emily continued with her treatments, and though she still had moments of doubt, she could feel herself getting stronger. It wasn't a sudden transformation, it was gradual, a slow but steady climb back to health. And with every step, she felt a little more confident, a little more at peace with where she was. One afternoon, as Emily sat on the porch with a book in her hands, she felt a sense of peace settle over her that she hadn't experienced in a long time. The sun was beginning to set, casting a warm, golden light across the yard. Jack was busy in the garden, tending to the plants he had been working on for weeks. Emily watched him for a moment, admiring the way he moved with such focus and calm. There was something comforting about watching him, knowing that no matter what happened, he would always be there for her. As Jack finished up in the garden, he walked over to where Emily was sitting. He took a seat beside her, and without a word he reached for her hand, his fingers lacing through hers. "I was thinking," he said, his voice thoughtful, "once you're feeling even better, we could take that trip to the beach we talked about. It doesn't have to be soon, but I think it could be good for us to get away for a little while. What do you think?" Emily smiled, the idea of a trip filling her with excitement and hope. "I think that sounds perfect," she said, squeezing his hand. "I can't wait to go. Just the two of us, away from everything." Jack smiled back at her, his eyes lighting up at the thought of their future plans. It was a reminder that there was still so much to look forward to, so many more adventures to be had. Even though their lives had been filled with uncertainty and hardship, there was still hope on the horizon. And with each day that passed, Emily felt a little more certain that things were going to be okay. As the evening wore on, Emily and Jack continued to talk about their plans for the future, the trip to the beach, the small dreams they both had for their lives together. It was easy to talk about those things now, easier than it had been before. The weight of the past few months was still there, but it didn't feel as heavy anymore. The fear was still present, but it wasn't as consuming. Emily was starting to see that healing wasn't just about physical recovery. it was also about allowing herself to believe in the future again. Later that evening, as they sat together on the porch, Emily looked up at the stars. The night was calm and the world felt still. She rested her head on Jack's shoulder, feeling the steady rhythm of his breathing beside her. For the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to relax completely, to let go of the constant worry and fear that had plagued her for so long. "I'm glad you're here," she said quietly, her voice full of gratitude, Jack's arm wrapped around her, pulling her close. "I'll always be here," he said softly, his voice steady and sure. "We'll get through this together, Emily, and we'll have many more moments like this." Emily smiled, her heart full of love and hope. She knew there would still be hard days ahead, but she also knew that with Jack by her side, she could face anything. Together, they had already proven that no challenge was too great to overcome. And as the night stretched on, with the stars shining above them, Emily allowed herself to believe that the future was bright, that the love and support they had for each other would guide them through whatever came next. The days began to stretch longer as spring approached. The mornings were crisp, but the afternoons carried a warmth that made the world feel new, alive, and full of promise. Emily had started to feel more like herself, though she knew her journey wasn't over yet. Her recovery, both physical and emotional, was still unfolding, and each day felt like a small victory. But the road to truly feeling whole again wasn't an easy one. It required patience, not just with her body, but with her heart. Jack was there every step of the way. He continued to be her pillar of strength, offering unwavering support when she needed it most. But more than that, he had become her safe space. His presence had shifted from being a source of reassurance during the toughest moments to a constant companion in the small, everyday moments that made up life. They no longer spoke only about the illness or her recovery. They spoke about the future, their hopes, and the things they dreamed of doing together. The simple acts of sharing a cup of coffee in the morning, laughing over a silly movie, or holding hands as they took evening walks in the neighborhood felt like the foundation of a life they were building together. One afternoon, as the sun cast long shadows across the yard, Jack surprised Emily by taking her hand and leading her outside. It was a beautiful day, and he wanted her to feel the warmth of the sun on her face, to enjoy the world outside the four walls she had spent so much time in over the past few months. "Come on," Jack said with a smile. "Let's take a walk." Emily hesitated for a moment, unsure if she had the energy, but then she realized how much she missed being outside, how much she missed feeling the simple pleasures of life that she had taken for granted. She nodded, a soft smile tugging at her lips. "Okay, let's go." They walked slowly, side by side, the gentle breeze rustling the leaves of the trees around them. The world felt so peaceful, so still, as if it had been waiting for Emily to be ready to embrace it once more. She breathed in deeply, the fresh air filling her lungs, and she felt a small sense of hope flutter within her. For the first time in a while, she allowed herself to imagine what life would be like after all of this. What would it be like to walk down this path with Jack, free from the weight of illness, free from the fear that had once consumed her? "I've been thinking," Jack began as they walked along the path, his voice soft but filled with purpose. "Once you're fully recovered, I want us to do something special, something we've both been dreaming about." Emily turned to him, intrigued. "What do you mean?" Jack's eyes sparkled with excitement, and he gave her hand a gentle squeeze. "I want us to go on that trip we talked about down to the coast, but not just for a weekend. I want to spend a whole week there away from everything. No distractions, no worries, just us. I think we both deserve that." Emily's heart skipped a beat. The thought of getting away from everything, of spending uninterrupted time with Jack in a peaceful place, filled her with a sense of calm that she hadn't felt in so long. It sounded perfect. "I love that idea," she said, her voice full of warmth. "We could explore the town, spend the days on the beach, and just enjoy each other's company." "Exactly," Jack said, grinning at her. "I want us to make some new memories, to have something to look back on, something beautiful after everything we've been through." The idea of the trip filled Emily with anticipation. It was a symbol of hope, a promise of something to look forward to, a life that, despite the hardships, was still full of opportunities for happiness and peace. And as she walked beside Jack, she realized that this journey was more than just about healing from illness. It was about reclaiming the life that had been paused, about stepping forward into a future where they could both be free to enjoy the simple pleasures that life had to offer. As the days passed, Emily continued to improve. She was able to go on longer walks, spend more time outside, and begin participating in activities she had once enjoyed. Her energy returned slowly but steadily, and each small victory felt like a triumph. It wasn't just her body healing, it was her spirit, too. She felt more alive, more hopeful than she had in months. Jack continued to be there for her, always encouraging, always patient. He never rushed her, never pushed her to do more than she was ready for. He simply let her take her time, offering his support when needed, and standing by her side as she navigated the path to recovery. One evening, after a quiet dinner, Jack and Emily sat outside on the porch, looking up at the stars. The cool air of the evening was a welcome relief, and they sat together in comfortable silence, the weight of the past few months still lingering in the air but not nearly as heavy as it once was. Emily had never been more aware of how much she had grown during this time, not just physically, but emotionally as well. She had learned to lean on others, to accept help, and to trust in the love and support that Jack had offered without hesitation. "I never really thought about how much I needed someone," Emily said quietly, her voice soft as she gazed up at the stars. "I've always been so independent, always tried to do everything on my own. But you've shown me that it's okay to let others in. It's okay to need help." Jack's hand found hers and he squeezed it gently. "You don't have to be strong all the time, Emily, and you don't have to do everything alone. I've learned that too. We're better together." A wave of emotion washed over Emily, and she turned to look at him. His eyes were soft, full of understanding. "I'm so glad I have you," she whispered. "I'm glad you have me too," Jack replied, his voice steady and reassuring. "And I'll always be here, no matter what." They sat there for a while longer, hand in hand, taking in the quiet of the evening. The world seemed to slow down around them, and for the first time in a long time, Emily felt at peace. There would still be challenges ahead, of course. There would be days when she would struggle, days when the fear would return. But she knew now that she wasn't alone. With Jack by her side, she could face anything. Together, they had already overcome so much, and she believed they could continue to face whatever came next. A few weeks later, when Emily felt stronger than ever, they finally set off for the beach town Jack had promised. It was everything they had imagined: quaint streets lined with small shops, the salty breeze from the ocean, and the sound of the waves crashing on the shore. They spent their days exploring the town, relaxing on the beach, and talking about everything and nothing. They shared meals at small, local restaurants, laughing over silly stories and making memories that would last a lifetime. On the last evening of their trip, as the sun set over the ocean, Emily and Jack walked along the beach, the sand cool beneath their feet. The sky was painted in shades of pink and orange, and the waves seemed to reflect the beauty of the moment. "This has been perfect," Emily said, her voice full of contentment. "It has," Jack agreed, his arm around her waist. "It's exactly what we needed." They stopped for a moment, looking out at the horizon, feeling the calm of the world around them. Emily knew that this was just the beginning of a new chapter in their lives, a chapter full of hope, love, and the promise of more beautiful moments together. And with Jack by her side, she knew that whatever came next, they would face it together.